All right, so it's the original covenant that God makes with Abraham. But if we jump ahead to Romans, Paul tells us, be careful and don't judge. Someplace in the middle, we find Jesus. Today with Tom Clegg.
Let's get it started. Ha! Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Ha! Let's get it started in here. Yeah.
Let's get it started in here.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 855-244-0077. That's 855-244-0077. Now, here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
Hi, good afternoon. Friday, The View from a Pew, one of our favorite days. We have all of our favorite pastors, preachers, and teachers on with us today. Bob Montserrat, the cat in the hat, watching the chat, and The Voice. That's right. Frank is here today because you're starting your show today.
Next Friday.
Get up to the microphone.
Next Friday.
This leans back. What? And I think this guy's going to be a radio guy.
Radio star.
Next Friday at what time?
5:30.
5:30?
Yes.
Why
That's
don't you-
just the kickoff show.
Oh, you ought to, because you ought to be as close to my ending so you get some
Well, that's-
carryover.
I'm
a decent lead-in show.
I want to try to have my daughter in as my first guest, and she's that's the time she gets off work.
Oh, so you're going to adjust the time of your show based on the needs of your guest.
Man, they do that? Hosts do that?
Apparently
Will
he
adjust
does.
their schedule to yours?
Well, when
Holy
you're getting
shush, Thomas.
when you're getting
Jeepers.
started, you can't look a gift horse in the mouth.
All right. So judgment is always been for 2,000 and some odd years something that has plagued the Christian community. The non-believers, the Pharisees, the atheists, and all will say the moment you hold a mirror up to their life, they'll say, "Well, you're judging. Judge not, yet ye be judged. Is the plank still in your eye while the sand is in mine?" And this becomes very apparent in Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans. In fact, Paul's letter to the Ephesians talks about it. It's constantly a thread throughout the Bible. But Tom Clegg is here to talk to us about where the original covenant between God and Abraham came and why we need to look at things differently. Now, you're at what? You say 18? Is that what you said, Genesis?
15. Genesis chapter 15.
Genesis 15. All right, where do you want me to start? You want me to read from 1?
Let's do the whole chapter.
I'm not going to read
It's
the
not that
whole-
long. It's not that long.
Seriously? You want me to read the whole chapter?
Only if you want the whole truth.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. That's like Pastor Mike standing up on a snowy Sunday saying only those people that love Jesus the most are here today.
Yeah.
And which version do you want read?
I'm going to read, what should I read? I've got King James Modern Language, Living Bible, and Revised Standard.
I've got the New International Version in front of me. You can pick whichever
Well,
you want.
if you've got it, you read it.
All right, I'd be happy to.
All right.
Here's God's word. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your very great reward. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You've given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. And he took him outside and said, Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. And Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited him as righteousness. He also said to him, I'm the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I'll gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of the prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep. A thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they'll be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot and a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river of the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadamites, Hittites, Perizzites, Raphaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, Mosquitobites, and Jebusites.
There was no mosquito bites in
I
there.
threw that in.
So what is this land that he speaks of?
Well, it's the Promised Land.
Physically today, though.
Well, it's the nation of Israel.
Okay, so
more or less.
More or less
The Promised
Israel.
Land there. And why, when you wanted to talk about judgment, as Paul was mentioning there in Romans chapter 2, I wanted to go to this chapter because, first of all, it's one of the most wonderful chapters in the entire Bible, and to me, the most truly comforting and life-transforming passages of Scripture. But it doesn't make much sense unless you grasp the background of the story and the context. If listeners are new to the faith or maybe just exploring Christianity, the Old Testament, the newest parts of the Old Testament were written 400 years before Jesus Christ's advent. And a lot of people want to throw out the Old Testament as somehow irrelevant. We need both halves, the Old Testament and the New Testament. They both are given to us to guide us in life. They're given to us to point us to Jesus Christ, to reveal to us the grace of God. But a lot of people dismiss the Old Testament because it's confusing and thick and old and archaic, and isn't that kind of the mean God? And then we get in the Old Testament, we get the nice God, which is a gross overstatement. St. Augustine said that the Old Testament is really like a beautifully furnished room that's poorly lit. And it's only when you open the window of the New Testament and let that light shine in that we really get the opportunity to see the beautiful and wonderful things there are that otherwise are very hard to see. So I kind of want to look at this chapter today in kind of 3 parts. The first part is the first 8 verses. And in there, we encounter Abraham's just naked, raw doubts and fears and questions. And then in the second half, verses 9 through 21, is really where we meet God's deep, deep assurances and answers to Abram's questions and his fears. And then at the end, maybe wrap this all together to show how it makes sense to our lives, because this really is the fulcrum of our faith. It's the vortex, it's the ground zero, it's where it is first articulated and explained to us, and it is the terms by which God's salvation comes to his people.
Tom Clegg is our guest today, and we are looking at Genesis 15. It's interesting because in the first few verses, Abram is really arguing with God. And telling him, no, sure. I can't. I don't have you haven't blessed me with children. I'm too old. Right. How can I do this? And then in the second half, God just kind of, calms him down?
Sure. He gives him this deep, deep, deep assurance and answer to his very real questions. His daddy, you got to admire this guy who would, right in the face of Almighty God, give him his great doubts and these really probing questions that are questioning God and then also questioning himself. So if we unpack this a little bit, it begins with that passage, do not be afraid, Abram. And that's because he just successfully mounted a rescue mission of his nephew Lot from this neighboring warlords. And he was living in this very ugly clan-eat-clan world. And so he's afraid of retribution because he's rescued that's where that assurance comes off. And he's terrified of all this. And to that, God says, do not be afraid. I'm your shield and your very great reward. And despite how incredibly assuring that would be to hear from God, he comes back with, but I'm scared. Yes, I'm scared. You said, and he's going back to promises God has made previous that makes the chapter make sense. God had promised that he would become a great nation. He'd have many children and they'd become a great nation. And this hadn't happened yet. God had made a promise and it hadn't happened yet. And, that's where we live a lot of our life, right? Is where it hasn't happened yet. I mean, the 3 days that have been talked about by more human beings over the course of human history are the Friday that we call Good Friday, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. The Saturday in between, and the Sunday of the resurrection. And we live a good deal in Saturday, don't we?
So how long did, my understanding, I think I've heard was approximately 20 years. Was it about 20 years before Isaac was, from the promise to Isaac being born?
Sure. And they were both elderly, right? And when Abraham said to Sarah, we're going to have a child, she was old enough that she laughed in his face. Yeah. Like, don't you understand how this works? That's not going to happen. And she laughs in his face, which is oftentimes our response to God anyway. Too good to be true. We laugh it off. And so he's saying, I'm scared because you promised me this inheritance of children, and I'm not getting it. I'm going to have to, the laws of primogeniture, he would have to give his estate to the eldest slave in his household, this guy named Eleazar. And so God made a promise, but he hadn't come through yet. And so Abraham is saying, look, God, I have a lot of doubts, and these doubts are about you, and you're fulfilling your promise to me, you to live up to your word. And God responds, this man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. And he took him outside, look up at the heavens, and count the stars, if indeed you can count them.
What experience has Abram had with God up to this point?
Oh, he met God, and God came to him in the wilderness, as oftentimes not like Moses, but out of nowhere, and he's had this living, real relationship with Jehovah Yahweh, the God of the universe, and to the point that we're recording direct dialogue between he and God Almighty, and here God is taking this deep. Trying to drive this deep assurance into his life and answer his fears by taking him outside. I remember I first heard this story from my mom in our backyard as a boy. And I remember the old green and white plaid lawn chairs, leaning back in it, and I was on her lap, and we were looking at the stars, and she was telling that's how God promised Abraham how his people would be, and that you are one of those stars, so to speak. And God gives him this great assurance, and this is the important part for every one of us to grab. He gives him these deep assurances despite the fact that Abraham is still filled with doubt and question. Doesn't make the doubt and question go away, and then makes the assurance. He gives the assurance despite all of the fallenness, the brokenness, the doubts, the questions, the stuff that go with being a human being, right? And in verse 6, it says that Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. We could spend all day just on that sentence, but I got to push on. Then God said to Abram, I'm the Lord who brought you out of the Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I'll take possession of it? Now, this guy is just like you and me.
He's doubting God already. Still, continued.
Yeah, and his assurance lasts a total of one verse, actually a punctuation mark, a period, the next sentence, it's back.
Yep.
I don't know about you, but, I got the name Thomas, I think, by default. That's my nature. I am, I don't believe it unless I see it. That's how I am. And so he's just like you and me. Now they're back, but his doubts have changed. His doubts now are not about God fulfilling his word. His doubts are about himself living up to God's promise.
Well, I know you didn't want to get into this, but I assume you're meaning his faith at the time was counted to him for righteousness.
Certainly.
So the first covenant was obey and live.
Well, it was, but not entirely. Let's get to the end of it where we see the fullness of it.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue. This is a study today of Genesis 15 and the covenant with Abram, and we'll continue that. Good radio, good conversation. Your voice always welcome at 1-855-244-0077. And we're coming back with Tom Clegg, Bob Montserrat, Frank the Voice. Ryan and me, J. Michael McCoy. Thanks for listening to KTIA, Iowa.
Across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
Yes, now your favorite programs on Webcast One Live can all be watched and listened to on any Android or Apple device. Your phone, tablet, or iPad. Yes, your favorite shows on Webcast One Live are available live or on podcast wherever you go. Let me introduce to you some of our great shows.
Shalom! Every week on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, we'll talk about issues in the Middle East, issues related to the Jewish tradition and religious traditions in general, and keep you up to date on exactly what's going on around the world. You may know some of the story, but you haven't heard all of the story until you've heard it on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman and our special guests we have on every week.
Hey, this is Doc with Doc and Lefty. I want to tell you about our brand new time slot. It's from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's on the same night, Tuesdays. We now follow Ed Fallon and the Fallon Forum on webcast1live.com. I want to tell you a little bit about our show. Our show is focused on local, state, and national, and sometimes international politics. We like to keep people updated and informed. We also have very interesting guests. So please join us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on webcast1live.com.
So when you want to watch your favorite Webcast One program, remember, there's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you needle credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit, you're our hero!
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
21 minutes after the hour, Tom Clegg is our guest today. Bob Montserrat, the cat in the hat, watching the chat. The Voice, Frank in, as Frank's own show will begin a week from today called Frankly Speaking Live. You have a website yet?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, it's
up and running?
Up and running as of
well,
today.
I'm going to go have to take a look at that. And is Ryan going to produce it for you?
I believe so.
Okay, well, technically it'll be awesome then. We'll have to. But you said your daughter's your first guest?
That's the.
Why? You can't get. I mean, you have to go to the family. That's like the guy who becomes an insurance salesman and sells policies to the family first.
Well, you got to get comfortable.
Well, I guess that's nice that you're comfortable
Baptism
with
by,
your daughter.
or do you suggest baptism by fire?
I think you bring in Bradshaw. I think you start out with Bradshaw.
You call him and you get him in.
All right.
I'll interview him.
I'll tell him 5:30 next Friday night. I bet he's not working.
There it is. You heard it here, folks.
Tom Clegg is our guest, and we're talking about the covenant that God made with Abram in Genesis 15. Prior to that, what's the covenant that the people of Israel, the people on earth, Noah's people, what do they think their agreement is with God? What's our deal with God?
Well, up to that point, people, they knew there was a God. He was afar off. They'd been separated by sin, cast out of the garden, and they would offer sacrifices in an effort to atone for sin and sort of seek their way back to God in a number of fashions. But really, the long and the short is distance due to this separation. Like any relationship when it's broken.
Okay, and where do, I don't mean to be difficult, but where do they get the idea?
Why should this show be any different?
Where do the people get the idea that they should offer sacrifices to God?
Well, it's long understood that penitence, was sacrifice, and the offering of animals, was freely understood, both in a civil way to make recompense between persons, to enter into contracts like we'll get here in a moment, and that's how you would satisfy deity and deities. There were competing gods.
That was commodity at that time.
Well, don't you think that act had to crush Adam?
Oh, sure.
Being that he actually named the animals, and then he has to witness.
Think about that.
He has to witness the animals that he named.
He's wearing their skins and taking their life.
So you think before Adam and Eve in the fall that animals were not there to be eaten?
Well, I don't know. We have canines and incisors in our mouth, which are meant for the tearing and ripping of flesh. I'm not going to get into all of that.
Yeah, that's
necessarily. But the long and the short, the story unfolds in the beginning first 8 verses here. It's all about doubt. It's Abraham's doubting God's ability to fulfill his word, and now he's doubting himself to live up to his end of the bargain, that there was not going to be a great nation, that this promise won't be fulfilled. And then God responds. And I think it's important, before we really move into that, to kind of sum up what have we learned this far. We learned that God is totally open to Abram's doubts, just like he's open to yours and mine, our doubts and fears and questions. I mean, God says, I'm the Lord, I'm going to do this and that and that. He doesn't, notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, how dare you, little slime ball, to doubt me. He doesn't go all Wizard of Oz on him. There's no great screaming head and ball of fire.
Right.
Instead, he just very tenderly answers him. And when Abram has even more doubts, God answers his fears and doubts again and again with even more patience. And that is really good news to we human beings, that on one hand, God is very, very patient with doubters. And on the other hand, he doesn't let us stay in our doubt. He accepts our doubt, but doesn't let us stay there. Instead, he keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And it reminds me of the sort of ultimate, most famous of all doubters in the Bible, who was, of course, Thomas, yeah, my name's sake. And so John 20, Thomas isn't there when the resurrected Jesus is with the other disciples. And so they're telling him all this great thing. And he says, no way, it can't be. Not until I put my hand in his side and see the nail print in his hand, I'm not going to believe it. So when Jesus does show up, what did he say to Thomas? Here.
Yeah.
You want to touch me? Go ahead.
Yeah.
And blessed are those who believe and they don't see.
Right, exactly. And right in between there, he says, here, look, Thomas, go ahead and touch me. Now, stop doubting and believe. It's not slapping him. It was not, how dare you. It's, here you go. Stop down. He meets us, but he never lets us acquiesce in our doubts. He never lets us stay there without a fight, without giving up without a fight. So he's the perfect balance between patience and gentleness with us doubters. And that's incredibly important for all of us to understand, that it's the setup here is none of this is about our amount of faith or really any good in us. And that's important to remember as we move on, because, look, some of our listeners, and maybe some of you guys, were raised in families or questions where, this is God's word. We don't question God's word, right? This is very strict and rigid. No room for doubt. Take it from this Thomas. Churches and their traditions in which it is unsafe to doubt actually creates skeptics and skepticism. If you can't be open about your doubts, you'll never get any answers.
Right.
You'll be left there, and that's contrary to God's character that we see, displayed right here. Yet we also live in a culture where it's very sophisticated to doubt. I mean, who can know anything about anything? So we've got this sort of traditional tradition where it's wicked to doubt, and then we have this sophisticated, it's a vice to doubt, and the sophisticated culture where it's a virtue to doubt on both ends of the spectrum. And where God lives and wants us to be is really in the tension between those two.
Well, it speaks to me that God hasn't designed for us to be free moral agents. There's a choice to be made.
Always. Yeah, always. And we got to remember, he's ever patient and gentle, but he never lets us stay there. He establishes that is not a safe place to be forever.
Okay, I'm devil's advocate for a minute, and I have someone in my mind, maybe we all have that person in my mind, that absolutely outspoken atheist, who you can, with patience and tolerance and love, answer their ridiculous questions and doubts the best you can. Sure. Why doesn't God move them to a place of understanding? Why do those people continually take a paycheck from the accuser to confuse and make this world a much less joyous place to live?
I love atheists, which really at the heart of it, American atheists are really more angry Christians than they are genuine atheists, because it seems to be the same God and same scriptures that they refuse to believe in, and in an essence try to use that disbelief as a way to punish God. If he's not there, then why bother? I don't understand all of the energy, but I do know that hurt people and rejected people reject people, and there's always a secondary issue. But the inquiring mind filled with doubt. I mean, we're living in an increasingly unchurched culture where the givens no longer are the same, whether it's biblical literacy or even familiarity with the story or the narrative. We lack a unifying meta-narrative. We don't have a shared human story. So the starting points, oftentimes are where the argument ends up going deeper, because we insist on our starting point, let's say, as the Bible, as opposed to how do you reach a world where the starting point is not the Bible? I think that's a topic for a whole nother week of shows. But
I only get you for 26 more minutes, so answer it now.
Well, I think Ecclesiastes says, he wrote eternity in the hearts of men, but they cannot comprehend what God has done from beginning to end. I think there is an essence of revealed truth in character that can't be explained from the evolutionary record, nor can you use the Bible as the starting point of the conversation. For example, where does the need for transcendence, to have a purpose in life? Where's the need for significance, to have meaning in life? Where's the need for love, to have meaningful relationship? The need for justice, the understanding of beauty. How can you explain these things from the evolutionary record? You simply cannot.
Well, my understanding, and I've always been taught that obviously it's impossible to please God without faith.
Sure.
So that tells me right there, the issue that I have with atheists is they refuse to understand that concept. But it tells you that being that it's impossible to please God without faith, God will never remove all doubt.
No, he won't. Paul said, hope that is seen is no hope at all.
Hope that is seen. Okay, gotcha.
Is no hope at all. But where's the room for faith? You don't need it. Right? And there'll always be for the possibility of love has to be the possibility of love.
Okay. But you and I talked earlier about what's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any doubts that my faith is not faith. It's fact.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even every once in a while when I just want to drive down the road and I hear the voice of one of those atheists in my head, and I want to think, well, what if really God created people and he's going to allow some of them to just burn in hell for eternity because they just were mentally inept or angry or whatever, that they wouldn't have faith? And then I think, well, no, that's not true, because I know I have it. I have no doubt.
Well, the evidence of things unseen. You know that you know down deep in your knower You know it to be true, you know it to be factual, but at the same time, vast elements are unprovable using the scientific method. For example, do you love your wife?
Absolutely.
How do you know?
How do I know?
That was the question.
Well, I don't want to be a smart aleck, but can I tell you?
Yeah.
Because I think about my life without her, and everything I just see it sad. I just cry and I weep, and it just gets dark and my shoulders hump over. And
okay, that's what it does to you, but how do you know you love her?
That's emotion and feeling.
Well,
how do I know I love her? How do I know I love her? Because I know love. I know what love feels like. I know, probably more so, I know what unlove feels like.
Okay, then what is love?
And I don't get that from her at all.
What is this thing called love?
God.
Wow.
It's the only example I can go to.
Okay. It's a limited explanation to the uninformed listener, right? It's something you know that you know down deep in your knower. You know it more than anything else that you know. You know absolutely that you love her, but you can't really put it into words.
Words is impossible.
In fact, if you could, you would first of all bested Shakespeare and Keats and Lord Byron and every great poet and songwriter and playwright and movie maker and artist and lover that's ever been. Just like you've learned when your spouse turns to you and says, I love you, dear, and you say, well, I love you too, and then he or she says, why? You've learned to be very careful at this point. Because if you say, well, I love you because you're so beautiful and how you move me, and you're a great cook and you're good with the kids and you're so great with the scriptures and I know and you just start describing all of these things that you love in her, let's just say. In the end, all you've said is, I love you because I find you serviceable to me.
But
which is everything love is not.
My answer to that came in our deepest and darkest places in our marriage when we didn't know whether there was going to be a marriage tomorrow. And the question was, why do you love me? And my answer was, because God told me to. As a person, you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer right now in my life, honey. But God told me to love you and never leave your side. Tom Clegg is our guest. Bob Montserrat, the voice. I'm Mac and Ryan. We're coming back live on KTIA, Iowa.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershot.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me. But is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going, though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
We're the ones in the pew, not pulpit. Come on now, let's reason together. The phone lines are open, so call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
22 before the top, Salem Radio Network News, and then Michael Mudloff at 4:03 with True Blue. Okay, Tom, I'm going to turn this over to you. We got 10 minutes. Tell me why that God will allow us to doubt, walk from, blaspheme, cause others to sin, and yet he is still always there for us.
Well, why and how is found right in the rest of the story, starting in verse 10, where he makes this unusual request to Abram. Go out and bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, all 3 years old, and a dove and a young pigeon. And without any further instructions, Abram goes out, does this, brings the pieces back, and butchers them, cuts them in two, arranges their severed halves across from one another, and makes this rather macabre, bloody aisle. And he immediately understood why. Because in the pre-literate days of the ancient Near Middle East, this is how persons entered into a contract. Now, when you and I, want to hold each other accountable, we write the terms out on a piece of paper and then we sign on the dotted line. Yeah, okay, and that's how we hold each other accountable. But in those days, before all of that, how persons held each other accountable is they would act out the drama of the consequences of not fulfilling the terms of the covenant. So if you and I entered into a contract, we would do the same thing, sacrifice these animals. There they would be in the bloody trail, and we would walk. Our sandals would make footprints of blood in the sand. We would grasp each other's arms, and we would look in each other's eyes, and we would say, Frank, if I don't live up to the terms of this covenant, what I've promised you today, may I become just like these severed animals. And it was called the consequences of the covenant. We acted out the consequences of failure, and it was deeply understood that that's what would happen. Later in Jeremiah, the prophet writing in chapter 34, verse 18, those who violated my covenant and have not fulfilled the terms of the covenant they made before me, I will treat like the calf they cut in two and then walk between the pieces. I will hand them over to their enemies, and their dead bodies will become food for the birds and air of the air and beasts for the field. I mean, it was a very real way of what happened if you broke your word. And it's called really the curse of the covenant. And I'm thinking, next time you go to negotiate a new cell phone contract, let's use something like this. We might get a little better service. Anyway, one more thing about covenants in those days. If you had a covenant between non-equals, let's say a king conquered territory, he would bring in all of the landowners, right, the nobles, and they would array before him. They'd put a temporary throne there. He'd sit on it, and he'd dictate the terms of the covenant. They would sacrifice the animals, but the nobles would walk through it by themselves, not the king. They would be swearing that if we don't pay our rent or tax or whatever, may we become like those. The king was being gracious and letting them have a covenant because he could just squash them and kill them and take their land permanently, but he knew he had to have a labor force to manage it, so they kept their lives, he got his taxes, and it was unilateral. Now, only the vassal, would take the oath. And Abraham is absolutely sure that is what is happening to him here in the narrative. He knows that God is going to ask him to lay down some impossible promise, and he wouldn't be able to live up to it. He was absolutely certain, but he was absolutely wrong. Certain that he was going to be asked to walk between the pieces and make a vow, promise to do something or die, but it's not what happened. And what does happen is one of the most astonishing and dramatic scenes in all of the Bible, and it doesn't make any sense in this Old Testament book unless we open up the New Testament window and let the light shine through. The Isle of Dead Animals, the blood, the offal, the doubt, Abram, the setting sun, and in verse 12, a great darkness fell on him. And it wasn't the darkness of like a solar eclipse. It's the darkness of terror. It's, he fainted, floored, catatonic. It's more like he blacked out, more like he was knocked out by the realization that God, beyond reiterating his promise, know for certain, down he goes. And then in the next instant, fire and smoke appear. Now, these are really difficult words from the Hebrew to translate. They're the exact same words about the fire and smoke on the Mount Sinai when God came down and gave the law to
Moses.
Here in the NIV, it's flaming pot and blazing torch. It's really more accurately a billowing smoke and blazing lightning. And these are physical manifestations of God in our universe. And every one of those in the Old Testament is always pointing right to Jesus coming in the New Testament. This manifestation of God. God shows up physically. Lightning, and it's like this bolt of lightning appears and holds its shape. Just imagine that crackling and blinding and the smoke. And God himself is making a covenant with Abram, a covenant promise. And he's saying, if I don't do this, Abram, may I be torn to pieces. May I die. And astonishing, because it's the king himself passing between the pieces, making the covenant with Abram, who's just a poor, lowly nobody. God is saying, Abram, if I fail to live, if I fail to bless you, may my immortality become mortal. May I stop being God. May I be cut off if I don't bless you. And astonishing as that is, it's not all that's happening in the story. God passes through the pieces. He makes the covenant. He takes the oath. Verse 17 and 18, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, and a smoking firepot, blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. It's not just astonishing that God walks between the pieces. It's equally astonished as who does not walk between the pieces. Abram.
I was just going to say.
It's a complete role reversal. So to be part of this covenant, Abram, you don't get to do a thing.
God's doing the heavy lifting.
All of it.
But so in this covenant, our promise is when we look back at the cross, that's our salvation. These people in this covenant prior to the cross was looking forward to God's only son dying.
That's right.
Type was the sacrifice. The animal type was the sacrifice. And then Christ coming was the anti-type.
Right. Exactly. If I fail to live up to this covenant, I will pay the penalty. And if you fail to live up to the terms of this covenant, I will pay the penalty, because your faithfulness has nothing to do with this blessing.
So we didn't live up to it.
Nope.
And the pain of the covenant was him coming to earth as Jesus and dying on the cross?
Exactly. Jumping right ahead. That's exactly right.
But the thing that I think gets skipped is the potential. Had he failed in this mission, he would have lost his lofty position in heaven as king of the universe.
Well, sure. He's saying, if either you fail or if I fail, I will be the one to be torn to pieces, so that I will still be able to bless you. And Abram was blown away. It was a deal too good to be true. It was an unconditional covenant. God saying, if either of us fail, I will pay the penalty. Flash forward Matthew chapter 15, or Mark 15, at noon, darkness came over the whole land in the afternoon. Another thick darkness, another thick dread. Isaiah 53, for I was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgression of my people he was punished. Cut off. Covenant language.
All right, we're going to wrap this up when we come back, because my biggest question is, so if we failed and God's come and paid the price, then what's next? What's our responsibility to God? That question next, live with Tom Clegg.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
10 before the top, Salem Radio Network News, and then Pastor Michael Mudloff, True Blue. Tom Clegg is our guest today, along with The Voice, Frank, and Bob Montserrat, the Cat in the Hat. So, okay, you did a good job. I love you, brother. You helped me understand a little bit more about the covenant and Abram and what all that means. But in the long run, now 4, 5, 6,000 years later, and the world is just, I can't believe he planned it this way. But what's the good news? What does it matter that this happened 5,000 years ago or longer?
Okay, where'd we leave it? Christ on the cross, crying out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Yeah.
Right. He's living the terms of the covenant being torn to shreds, cut off. Why have you forsaken me? That's covenant language. He turned to his Father in prayer in the garden, and there was nobody there. It began there, the ripping, the tearing, finally on the cross, his death on the cross. He died to fulfill the covenant between all of us and himself so that he could bless you, bless us, even though we undoubtedly continually failed him, so that our salvation could be absolutely unconditional. Such was the cost of God's astonishing generosity and love for us. Paul, you mentioned at the beginning, Galatians chapter 3, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abram might come to all through Jesus Christ. So your question is, what difference does this make to all of us? First of all, it shows that Christianity is unlike any other faith system on planet Earth. Every other faith system is do this, be good, and God will bless you.
Works-based.
Yeah. Christian system of faith, God blesses us, and so in turn we want to be good. It doesn't matter how much of a failure you are. If you enter into the covenant with the Father through Jesus Christ, his Son, you're saved by grace. Sheer grace. Nothing to do with you or me. You didn't have to, you didn't get to walk through the pieces. He took it all on himself. No other religion like it, because ours is a grace religion. Every other religion, do this and God will bless you. Christianity says God came and did this so that he could bless you unconditionally. Every other religion says, here's how you can find God. Christianity said, here's how God came to find you, and we would have never found him without it. So it's absolutely different. To think for 1 second that all religions are the same is utterly, based on this, preposterous. Second, let's get back to doubt and assurance, because that's really what this is all about, your doubts and mine and our listeners. Hebrews 6. When God made his promise to Abram, that's what we've just been talking about, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants, because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear. He confirmed it with an oath, and we have this hope as an anchor for our soul, firm and secure. And like every ship needs an anchor. And when the anchor is down, secure, not going anywhere, immovable, but the anchor is not based on anything you or I have ever done or could ever possibly do. And you'll never, ever find anything more secure than that. And it's in that fact that he has taken all of the judgment for all of our sin in himself on the cross, paved the way. You know, we jumped off the cliff. He hit the rocks below. He took it all in himself. And so when we can face up to that we acknowledge we cannot save ourselves. He has already paved the way. All we have to do is look to the Father and say, because of what Jesus has done, please accept me. Our old evangelical ways were accepting him. No. It's him accepting us. And he's already paved the way. And look at all the evil one has to play. The only game he has is to try to get us to anchor our soul anywhere else but in the firm truth of the grace of God, more real than the love you have for your spouse, more real than any final reality. And when we understand that, it demystifies, it makes it truly good news. You're far more wretched and lost than your worst nightmare, and far more loved and adored than your wildest dreams. That's who you are in God's eyes. He paid all the way. He came to the place of being torn apart from his Father. The very fabric of the Trinity, the Godhead, ripped to pieces to fulfill this promise, to bring us all the way back to him so there could be love. There could be relationship. Why you and I were created, to be in relationship with God, and which was broken in the garden and was guarded by an angel with a sword. That sword then came down on Jesus on the cross and paved the way back where we can live, not in Eden, not going back to the garden, but going forward to him, to new heaven, new earth, but right now, heaven here on earth, when we human beings will grasp and be grasped by this astonishing truth, we are able to lay a lot of our garbage aside. And when it comes to judgment, of being able to live like Jesus, who said, I didn't come into the world to condemn the world. I came into the world that through me, all the world might be saved. That's when God's grace moves into our lives, and our lives become an agent of his grace, expanding the ever-widening circle of this incredible good news that lies at the heart of our faith, lies at the heart of the Bible, God's revealed truth to all of us, that he took care of all of it. And all we have to do is look to him and say, because of what you did, please accept me.
Tom Clegg, been our guest today. An incredible unpacking of Genesis 15 and the covenant that God made with his people. You. God made with his people. Me. God made with his people. Everybody. It's tough sometimes to see God through the darkness that prevails on this light, on this world. It seems that the accuser, the devil, Satan, evil, darkness, death, rules us. But that's what he'd like us to think. He'd like us he'd like to come on the scoreboard of the Super Bowl halfway through the fourth quarter and say, listen, this is how it's going to end. The rest of the game is boring. Change the channel now, and I'll bring you entertainment. I'll bring you life. But instead, God says, no, I'm here. I'm here to forgive you, no matter what you've done. I've proved it in my covenant with Abraham, and then I proved it again in my covenant with you when I came down on that cross and died. Died for everything you had ever done wrong. And nobody else can bring you closer to your Father in heaven than that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Have a great weekend. If I just may, go Broncos. And until I see you again.
Seahawks by 6 in overtime.
Until I see you again, just remember, not only does God love you, but he wants you to talk to him. So just pray.